this has been a topic of conversation for years now, particularly in light of the fact that Cadillac was coming into the sport with Andretti for years trying to make it happen. And obviously there is still the Andretti involvement, even if it's more driven by Cadillac. Colton Herta's name has been attached to this venture for years. And the holdup has always been, and still is, I guess to some degree, the fact that he doesn't have the super license points. You just can't get them without finishing in the top three in IndyCar. So some changes on the IndyCar side. Will Power's going to Andretti. The seat opened up because Colton Herta is going to F2. And did you hear him on the podcast where he was talking about this is essentially an effort for him, like his dream since he was yay big was to race in Formula One. And the only way for him to do this is to take a step back from IndyCar, go race F2 and see if he can make that happen. So that's what we're going to see next year. Colton Herta in F2 in the Cadillac family, attempting to maybe get the seat someday.
Yeah, I didn't actually hear the podcast, but I need to go back and listen to it because I think this is interesting. I think it's brave as well to do this because he's 25 years old, which in any normal walk of life is still very, very young, and in reality is young. But in the world of Formula 2, Formula 1, making your debut in Formula 1, it's now or never. You know, he needed to make this decision, and he is really keen to pursue F1 and has been for some time. He did a McLaren development test back in the day. I think it was at Portimao. Looked pretty quick, but because of the way that the F1 super license points are weighted towards all the FIA junior series and less so IndyCar, it's quite remarkable that a 9-time winner in IndyCar doesn't have a super license or isn't considered good enough in the eyes of the FIA to have a super license. I think, you know, that's a clear oversight in the way that whole system works. And when you have point systems, that often happens. But if he is competitive in F2, then he will easily get the 5 points he needs to complete the 40 to go there. Also, if he does some FP1 sessions, which I imagine he will as a test driver for Cadillac, that's 1 point every time he goes out in one of those. So I think he's going to get to 40 points by the end of next year. The bigger question then is how he's got on in F2 and how competitive he looks. And that shouldn't be overlooked as something to do, to go from IndyCar, which is an incredible series in its own right, you know, with a skill set that I think many F1 drivers would struggle to adapt to immediately, to go the other way and into F2, which also is a series that is pretty random at the best of times. You know, it's often the case that drivers will go there and there'll be various reasons why they couldn't quite get it together. You only have to look as far as Kimi Antonelli and Oliver Behrman last year. Yeah. Both went to Prema, considered one of the best teams in F2. Prema just had a really bad year getting used to a new car, and neither driver shone, yet they both still made the step to F1. So there's so many other factors going on. But I think those that know and those that are part of the team that Herta ends up at, wherever it is, will be able to get a picture of what level he's at, where he is compared to the other F2 drivers. And then I think that will ultimately dictate whether he goes to F1. But we talked about this before, whether Cadillac needs a US driver. And I agree with everything that Graham Loudon said on this subject, which is that it's got to be on merit. If he's good enough, if he shines in F2, and obviously if he gets super license points, which I think he will, then sure. But he has to be good enough. But fair play to him for saying, look, I'm going to leave IndyCar, somewhere where he's had, a reasonable amount of success, and go across and just try and make that F1 debut, because that's a big, big, big life decision at 25 years old.
A massive life decision at that age, because you think about the people he'll be up against in F2. He's going to essentially be geriatric in comparison. I mean, look at how young Antonelli and Behrman are still now this season in Formula One. So yeah, it's a massive life decision. We talked about this too. I don't believe they need an American in the Cadillac team. I don't. I think if I'm going to cheer for a team, I'm going to cheer for a team because I like the team. I like their drivers. I could care less if they're an American or Spanish or English, or that's not what's going to make me cheer for a driver or a team. I do think let me go back. The one thing that I think would be different about this particular situation is if you look at the feeder system into Formula One for the last several years, Alexander Rossi was there, came over to the US, won the Indy 500, and people were like, who is this person? Because he grew up racing in Europe. If you look at Jack Crawford, same situation. If you look at, oh my God, Logan Sargent, I'm like, why is my brain going blank? Logan Sargent. Those are American drivers, but they didn't race here growing up. There isn't sort of like a book on them for American fans. Now, if you are deep into the system, you might know them, but there isn't that like built up fan base. So Colton is sort of doing it in reverse. One, his dad raced here. Brian Herta was part of that, really those cool years with Andretti where they were basically winning everything with Kanaan and Franchitti and Dan Weldon. And, he was part of that mix. So there is a tie to Colton because of his dad, but then also just watching Colton come up through IndyCar the way that he did. So he has, in a way, a built-in fan base, built-in name recognition that those other drivers don't. And it could be interesting to see if that is the thing that helps maybe unlock that part of the American base, the American fandom that doesn't exist when it comes to the other drivers. There is a recognition, there's a name recognition, there's even just like the face, hey, I know that guy. Why do I know that guy? So that's maybe the only benefit to doing this in reverse, that it could be like sort of an interesting social experiment. We'll see. But I also think it'll be very interesting to see how he does in F2 next season because he didn't finish in the top five in IndyCar this year. And with Formula Two being as sort of hit and miss as it can be, what happens if he goes to F2 and is just crap? That's
And
another world that we have to live in.
yeah, and I think actually it won't, early on, I think it's going to be tough because the whole way F2 is set up is as a feeder series to F1, so that he will learn some crucial stuff there.
Right.
But it means getting your head around Pirelli tires, and they're being designed to basically degrade during a race and make the race exciting in that way. And like you said, not only is he going to be up against kids who are younger than him, going through into F2, or most of them, but also kids who have probably been through Formula 3, where you get that first sense
Right.
of the Pirelli tire, and then also he'll be up against drivers who have been in F2 for sometimes 2, 3, sometimes 4 years. Guys do hang around. And so it's quite easy to look pretty average, even if the underlying talent is there, but you just got to get your head around some of this stuff. And I don't know enough about Herta, if I'm completely honest, to know whether he's been a particularly quick learner in IndyCar, but if he's going to succeed in F2, he's going to have to learn really quickly. He's going to have to adapt really quickly. But if he can do all of that, those are all things that are going to work for him in F1 as well. So it'd be fascinating to see how it goes. And actually, I wish there was more of this. I wish there was more movement from IndyCar to, ideally Formula One rather than Formula Two, but between the two series, and there was a better way to build up, name recognition on both sides
Yeah.
of the pond, because I think it's actually beneficial to both series, and often the two series kind of pitch themselves against each other a little bit too much,
I
like
hate
we were
that.
talking about with Indy
I
500 Canadian Grand Prix. And it's motorsport, and
know.
motorsport is fantastic, no matter which side of the Atlantic it's being raced on, no matter exactly what the track looks like, whether it's an oval or whether it's the Monaco street circuit. All of it is fascinating in its own right, and I think actually the drivers have a huge amount of respect for each other
Yeah.
across those lines as well. So the more this happens, I think the better, and better play to Herta for making it happen and being one of the drivers brave enough to make that step. We've seen quite a few drivers go the other way, it has to be said, from either F1 and not making a career in F1 and going to IndyCar, or
Fernando
even just
Alonso,
F2.
Roman Grosjean. Who else am
Yeah,
I
exactly.
forgetting?
Yeah. And even F2 drivers going across as well. So the more of it, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.